Welcome to Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation possible. You will get to hear from CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve process challenges and how they've earned success in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, you will enjoy the insights these industry professionals bring to this podcast. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Lisa Richter, the host of Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation and processing possible. In today's episode, we're talking industrial automation, well, sort of, with Cyndi Gennaro, a drummer who has recorded and toured with musical artists such as Joan Jett, Cyndi Lauper, the Monkees, Bo Diddley, Johnny Winter, the Mamas and the Papas, and others. Today, he is still in front of audiences because he has parlayed his drummer career into being a professional speaker, where he uses the lessons he learned surviving the music business to help people identify and solve issues regarding leadership, change management, employee retention, motivated engagement, customer service, brand loyalty, team building, and sales. As you may have guessed at this point in the intro, Cyndi is on the podcast because he will be a keynote presenter at the upcoming 2024 CSIA Conference in Dallas this April. But even if you don't plan to attend, stick around and listen to what Cyndi has to say, because it's not every day that an industrial automation podcast features a literal rock star. Cyndi, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Lisa. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So start from the beginning. Tell me your story. How did you get started in the music business and then, actually get paying work? That seems to be the real trick.
Well, there was two defining moments, and I go over this in my presentation. Number one, when I was 2.5, I received a toy drum for Christmas. And I was totally enamored by the fact that I can hit something with sticks and not get hollered at by my mother. And I was very attractive to rhythm from that point on. My dad played big band music around the house. He used to point out Buddy Rich and all the drummers in the big bands. And my sisters played 50s rock and roll. My older sisters played 50s rock and roll around the house. So I was always jumping around, banging the drum to whatever song was on we call it a Victrola. And then my second defining moment came when I was 13, February 9th, 1963, when the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan. That was the first time I saw actually a drummer in action, and it was the Beatles and Ringo, the first time in America. What sold it for me was when I saw how the girls reacted in the audience. I said, man, I'm not sure what's going on there, but I want part of that. And from that moment on, I knew exactly what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I started taking lessons and joined a little neighborhood band. And the first gig I ever did with the band was a graduation party, and I got paid $5 base salary. The 4-piece band got $20. And then we were asked to play another hour for another $10. So we split $10. So I went out of there making $7.50. That was my first gig, and I got paid. So I considered myself a professional at that time. Yeah. So basically that was the start.
Whenever I go to watch live music, I always pay attention to the drummer, because if he's enjoying it and you can see his excitement and passion, it's a good time, right?
Well, you know what? That's a good point, because the drummer is the most important person on that stage.
Yeah.
And it correlates with leadership in a company or a leadership within a company of a team. But the leader is the most important person in that team or in that company. And there, in my Vistage presentation, when I have a little bit longer than an hour or an hour and 15 to present, I go over the correlations between a leader and a drummer in a rock and roll band.
So tell me about the transition from doing these $7.50 an hour gigs or 2-hour gigs to actually playing arenas and being part of big name bands.
Well, I just went along with the flow of it. It wasn't really a planned thing. I played bars for like 10 to 12 years. And I even packed up and I moved to LA from New York City in 1976 to get my first big break in the music business. So I moved across the country and ended up getting my first big break in New York City with a band called Blackjack. We were signed by Polygram Records. But the convoluted way of how I got that gig, I ended up getting it back in New York City, is a really long story. And it speaks to my presentation, where it's what you do for other people. It's how you reach out to other people and to want to lift them up. And it always comes back to you in the end. And then from there, it was, like a domino effect. You're in it, you're enjoying the moment, and then you keep your eyes open for other opportunities, or you'll always do the best you can on that particular gig that you're presently in. And then other people hear you, other managers hear you, other musicians that come and see the band hear you. And it's like the roots of a tree that keeps spreading out over the years.
So tell me about the progression from playing in live rock music or whatever bands you're playing in to what you're doing now. Like, help me understand, like, at what point were you like, I need to do something different? And then how you discovered what that next thing would be.
Okay, well, that's a good point, Lisa, because again, it speaks. I work in my presentation, every presentation, I work from an acronym called BEATS: belief, enthusiasm, attitude, tenacity, and service. And every gig I have ever gotten in my whole life has come either directly or indirectly of me doing somebody a favor or me wanting to lift somebody up or whatever. I had in my 60s, I'm 72 now, but about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before the pandemic, I was wondering, do I have enough money put away when I retire? Let's say I live to 90, do I have enough money put away to kind of maintain my current lifestyle and not have to downsize or anything like that? So that was in the back of my mind, but I was still playing arenas in 2018, 2019. And I threw a drumstick to a handicapped person, a woman in a wheelchair, and I made sure she had it. It was kind of a lengthy story, but I tell this in my presentation because this is how I got into speaking. Threw a drumstick to a handicapped person. I made sure she got it after it was intercepted. The husband on the other side of her, Facebook messaged me, hey, you threw a drumstick to my wife last night in a wheelchair. My drumsticks are really chewed up, so I thought I maybe needed to call my lawyer. But I did. I had a fork in the road. Again, I had a decision. Am I going to give my number to a complete stranger? I did. He called me, his wife, explained it to me. His wife was over the moon, happy and almost in tears and whatever. The husband is a speaker. And he said, can I meet you for a coffee downtown? I'm doing a speaking engagement in Nashville. Now I'm in Nashville presently. Can I meet you for a coffee? And I want to thank you in person for engaging my wife. Did I want to meet him for a cup of coffee downtown Nashville? Is she a complete stranger? No. But did I go? I went. And I was flattered that he wanted to thank me in person, whatever. So I met with him and he asked me how I got certain gigs or whatever. I told him how the Cyndi Lauper story, the Joan Jett story, the Monkees story, blah, blah, blah. And long story short, going right to the conclusion, when it's still in progress, it's not a conclusion. But he said, you have a great experience speaking at the school in Manhattan, which I did. I spoke at a music school and I did presentations for large groups. So I had no problem speaking in front of an audience. But now the content changed, and he said, I'll help you get your speaking career off the ground using the stories in your career to help businesses in all the areas that you mentioned in the intro. So that's how I became a speaker. I started, and this gentleman is a Vistage speaker. He used to invite me to Vistage meetings. Subsequently, when he came to Nashville, I met some Vistage chairs. And at the time, I was doing like short 20 minutes at Chambers of Commerce's and Rotary clubs and stuff like that. But then I got the wherewithal and the advice to apply for Vistage. And I don't know if you know what Vistage, the organization is, but it's a CEO peer group organization. Speaking for that organization, speaking for CEOs that have their own companies, that led to me doing keynotes at certain companies. And then, it's like the roots of a tree again. And once it was well received, my presentation, I'm always looking for ways to improve it. So that's, I heard you speak here. Would you want to speak? So it was like the roots of a tree. Now I have my own career, my own business. My wife said to me, I did a conference in Vegas not too long ago at Caesar's Palace. On our way back to our room, people were asking me for my autograph and great presentation or whatever. And my wife says to me in the elevator, how does it finally feel to be the headliner? And I said, it feels really good. So that's the transition. Now I'm still playing a cover band here in Nashville. This is my office here in Nashville. You can see that I never, ever stray too far from a set of drums.
Yeah.
So I still teach here in Nashville virtually, and I get maybe 3 or 4 students a month coming here for a live lesson. But that's it. I'll be a drummer till the day I die, and that's my DNA. But now, it's not such an apples and oranges situation, Lisa. I'm talking in my presentation. I talk about my career. Yeah. I talk about my playing career and the lessons I've learned and how those lessons apply to business and how a drummer is like a leader, et cetera, et cetera.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because a lot of my listeners are engineers, and I'm sure in their head, they're like, this is super interesting. You're talking to this drummer, but this can't possibly relate to me in my life. They do seem like such disparate kind of careers. So talk a little bit about how everything is kind of applicable.
Well, I've had some really complicated drum sets in my life. So if you talk about engineering, I've had some really elaborate, in the 80s, it's like the decade of excess. I went over the top as far as the hardware and all of that. And I had to design that. Not only that, but I had to train my drum tech to have it to the 1/4 inch every single night. Listen, you mark the drums like you want. You can spike the stage how you want, the riser, but I need it to be the same, because a drummer, where his cymbals are, it's like an inch off, you'll notice it. In that way, the drummer as an engineer, it's a little bit of a stretch, but in terms of, constructing my drum set, my very elaborate drum sets now, it's as years went on and my confidence grew as a drummer, the drums got less and less and less elaborate. Now it's like a straightforward 4-piece drum set.
With thousands of qualified integrators and suppliers, the CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange is your one-stop spot to identify and connect with a diverse community of integrators and suppliers to help you deliver a low-risk and successful project. Using this powerful platform, you can do customized searches and filter by industry vertical, expertise, location, certifications, and more to source the right partners and products for your needs. For SIs and partners, it provides a platform to support your content and SEO marketing efforts, position yourself as a thought leader, and nurture prospects during their complicated buyer's journey. Why not take a minute to visit www.csiaexchange.com and see for yourself? No swiping left, no swiping right. Just connect directly to quality industry experts. It's really that simple, I promise. A lot of the people also listening to the podcast live a good portion of their life on the road. They're either in sales or business development, or maybe they're visiting customer sites in an emergency because some machine's not working and they have to troubleshoot issues. So this life on the road probably relates to a lot of people listening. And what's your advice for living life on the road? Because I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Well, living life on the road, you have your own little system. I always pack the night before. I always get everything ready the night before. I put my vitamins in the little daily thing the night before. Everything is done as much as I can do the night before. I do the night before. I always double check the itinerary. I always make sure my ride to the airport, whether I'm driving or taking a Lyft. And people that travel all the time know this already, but try to get the same airline all the time. I toggle between 2 airlines, and you want to build up miles and points with the airline and the hotel. And then if you choose a certain hotel brand, then they have a credit card. You can get the Amex Hilton card or the Amex Marriott card or whatever, and put all your business expenses on that one card. And then you don't have to save any paper receipts, which is very convenient. At the end of the year, you look at all your credit card statements and they kind of sum up the hotels and whatever. So it's very easy to with your accounting. But take care of your taxes too. Every time you get paid on the road, if you're an independent contractor, which I have been my whole life. So when I get paid, I make sure 20-25% is put away for taxes in a separate account. You never want to ignore the IRS because they will catch you. They will up to you. And a lot of musicians kind of blew that. When you get a big lump sum of money in a record deal advance, well, they go buy the Ferrari. Meanwhile, tax time, you can't send the Ferrari to IRS.
Yeah.
So it's like that.
But in terms of like coping personally with life on the road, because there's a lot of sacrifice involved in that, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was on the road, in the 80s and 90s and 2000s even, and even the late 70s. But my daughter was born in 1994, which is like almost a peak of my touring. So I felt a little guilty. Luckily, I had a partner, my wife, even though she worked full time. My mother, who was retired, lived nearby. So my wife had to navigate all of the daycare and to grandma's house and this and that when she worked in Manhattan from Staten Island. It was a big sacrifice on my wife's part. I went on the road and played rock and roll, but I used to come home and my daughter was 3 inches taller and she had 2 more teeth than when I left. And I felt a little guilty that am I missing a lot of her childhood? And my wife would explain to me, we lived on Staten Island, which is a suburb of Manhattan. She said to me, if you had a straight job, you'd have to get up at 6 a.m. to do the hour-and-a-half commute into Manhattan during the rush hour. And you wouldn't get home until 7:30 at night. And then you would have enough time to eat and maybe kiss the kid before she went to bed. And then you get up and do it all over again. And then on the weekend, you have to do your chores around the house. And that would be all the time. Now you go away for 2 or 3 weeks or maybe a month of 6 weeks in the height of the 80s. And before she was born, I used to go away for months at a time. But in the 90s, it was like 6 weeks, 4 weeks. But when you're home, Sandy, my wife would tell me, you're home. And I would be the soccer dad, or in her case, the softball dad, and bring her to softball practice. She was in marching band at school or whatever. So I'd be with her all the time, going on fun stuff, taking her there, here, whatever. It's a balance. And now my daughter is following my footsteps. She's going to be 30 and she's the road manager for the Pretenders.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she's going on the road, getting ready to go on the road with the Foo Fighters. So that's a big thrill for me that she saw, and I brought her to gigs and I set her on stage, with the headphones on behind me with the Monkees, and Davy Jones is taking her in her arms, singing Daydream Believer in front of 20,000 people. She sat on Bo Diddley's lap, and Bo Diddley's going, "You better stay in school, man. You better," so she's been in that environment. The backstage, the VIP, the laminated pass, the onstage, sound check, meeting the stars that she only saw on TV, whatever. In that way, I'm glad I was a dad in the music business because it showed the way for my daughter. And she's not doe in headlights when a famous person comes in. She's seen the movie. She's seen the movie already.
Yeah. So I think also people assume that people who are in the music business are either making a lot of money or living a super glamorous lifestyle. But from what I understand, it's really not. It's hard to pay rent. You're in a bus with the same people, kind of dirty, day after day. Would that be fair? Yeah.
There's dirty socks in the aisle. You're on a bus. And that's the sacrifice. The whole air travel, it's still as sucky as ever. Excuse the French. It still stinks. When I was on the road, I used to get paid for the performance because once I sit at the drum set and there's an audience there, whatever came before that day, no matter if there was an overnight travel, missed flights, all of that gets pushed to the side. Now I'm playing drums in front of people and making people move, giving them a little respite to their everyday life where they come to see an artist that I'm involved with. It's a very rewarding experience. A lot of people ask me the question, well, after traveling all day, all night, or overnight drive, and you hardly get any sleep, and you got to get to the town, and you got to unpack your stuff, then go for interviews and sound check and whatever. Aren't you tired before the gig? And I said, yeah, sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm very tired, but after a shower and I change my clothes into my stage clothes and I peek out 10 minutes before the show, I peek out and see the audience coming in. It's like the smell of the grease paint roar of the crowd. It's that kind of thing. So as soon as I see that happening, the adrenaline kicks in and I just can't wait to get out there. It's like Christmas morning. You see, can't wait to go and dig into those wrapped presents. Oh, it's going to be good. I mentioned the BEATS acronym. It speaks to the enthusiasm. The E in BEATS is enthusiasm. You've got a belief, of course, and I go through the items in my presentation about how each of those elements apply to a successful and fulfilled business and personal life.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. What are people who attend your presentation going to learn? What can they expect to learn?
What they can expect to learn is what you mentioned in the intro, how to retain your employees, change management, how to maintain a thriving culture. And on the opposite of that, if your culture has got issues and it's toxic and there's a lot of gossip, it all comes from you, leader. It all comes from the leader. So you have yourself to blame and to give you the credit for if your culture is toxic. So it speaks to all of that. How to get your people in sync with you, your mission, your result of a certain project at work, or your overall mission of your company and the vision of your company. That's your drumbeat. And you supply that drumbeat, and you got to make it really simple and repeat it often, and never let your people see you looking bored doing it. You have to repeat it often. And your goal as a leader, as my goal, is to bring the people on that stage in sync with you, to perform a common objective. And that's what a leader should do. Bring his people. And if you notice, the drummer is the most important person in the band, as the leader is in the company, but the drummer leads from the back. The leader should lead from the back, so to speak, in a spirit of support, not standing in front, pounding his chest. In a meeting, bosses never shut up, where a leader allows their people. And you always want to have the vibe where your people feel that their job is appreciated. Their effort is appreciated. They're listened to. They get asked questions as opposed to always get instruction. They have the ability to ask questions. It's an overall catch-all vibe, mindset, belief, enthusiasm, attitude, tenacity, and service to others. That's a mindset. You don't do it for anything in return. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And when you do that, when you live your life personally and a business way with that mindset, the universe, what I call God energy, will take care of you. And I'm Exhibit A.
Are you planning on joining your colleagues for the 2024 CSIA Conference, April 15th through the 19th? I hope so, because this year's event has some new features I think you're really going to enjoy. For starters, CSIA is inviting the next generation of leaders to attend this conference that explores not just the present state of the industry, but the future as well. In fact, there is a whole track devoted to emerging leaders, plus dedicated networking time. Don't worry, you'll still find plenty for the current leaders, like the second annual Business as an Investment workshop, as well as the classic Best Practices workshop. On a personal note, though, I'm most excited about the brand new workshop called A Strategy for Success: How to Build the Ultimate SI Marketing Playbook. It's a topic I'm personally super passionate about, but also, to be honest, I helped plan it. And we designed my dream workshop. Ultra practical, extremely hands-on, highly entertaining. Finally, the keynote speaker lineup is pretty special this year. From a literal rock star to a business makeover expert to an EOS implementer. Where else are you going to get that? You can explore it all at www.controlsys.org/conference2024. And remember, the sooner you sign up, the more you save. So smash that register button. See you in Dallas. So let's go back a little bit more to your life on the road or your life in the rock and roll band. Do you have an anecdote you could share, like something super unusual or super funny that happened? You've had to seen some stuff.
Well, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen or partook in a lot of stuff. Just one thing that comes to mind, when I was in the Monkees and I was celebrating my 50th birthday, this is one of the things that you have to live with life on the road, is being on the road and Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. How many New Year's Eves? Just recently, I've been able to spend New Year's Eve with my family. But I was 50 years old and we played a place in Rhode Island. I forget the name of the city, but I remember the whole day of my 50th birthday, July 3rd, no one in the Monkees or the crew or the band wished me a happy birthday.
Oh, no.
Lisa, I remember being before the gig, even that sound check. Now everybody's there at sound check. The band, the crew, the Monkees are all there. Nobody said a word. And I didn't say a word. And I was on the phone after sound check. We had dinner. Now it's about an hour and a half before we go on stage. And I called my wife. I said, you know what? She called me to wish me a happy birthday. And I said,
remembered.
you know what? Yeah, thank you, Cher. I said, you know what, Cher? Nobody in this effing band wished me a happy birthday. Nobody. Band, crew, nobody. So now I was kind of ticked off.
Yeah.
And I'm playing the show, but I'm playing the show to the best of my ability or whatever. And then in the middle of the show, Davey says, I did this little skit where I imitated Archie Bunker. So Davey comes down and goes, hey, Sandy, come on down and do your Archie Bunker. So I went down and I'm now on stage bantering with Davey before I did Archie Bunker. And all of a sudden, about 5 or 6 pies came.
Oh, no.
And I'm in front of like 15,000 people, all dripping with shaving cream pies. And the aluminum tins were falling off me. And then Davey goes, Sandy, let's all wish Sandy a happy birthday. And everybody, the crowd, the band, and they were playing happy birthday or whatever.
Yeah.
And then luckily they timed it where the next song in the set was Mickey Dolenz actually going on my drum set to play a song.
Oh, yeah.
They timed it, so now I had a chance to go off stage.
So be careful what you wish for, right?
That's a G-rated story that I can relate.
You know, you've been around a lot of famous people. Do you think fame changes people?
I've seen it change people, and I've seen it, in my case, it hasn't really changed me at all. And I think the thing that you have to retain is a sense of appreciation. You have to always have a spirit, a mindset of gratefulness, because when you're grateful for something, you appreciate something, a gift that you've been given, you nurture that gift. You don't take it for granted, because as soon as you assume that it's always going to be there or you take it for granted, that's when things can change in a heartbeat. So you just got to maintain your sense of appreciation. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of musicians that don't appreciate, that they become, all of a sudden, we have an expression that's kind of distasteful, and I'll kind of make it G-rated, but nobody goes to the bathroom and they look down and they see Haagen-Dazs. You know what I mean? Everybody is the same. Everybody, no matter how much money you make, no matter what kind of car you drive, no matter what you believe in, no matter, all human beings have a common denominator, and that's a soul inside of them. So everybody deserves a bottom line, a baseline amount of respect and appreciation. I've seen a lot of people that don't appreciate, where they get a bunch of money and they end up putting stuff in their body that they shouldn't be, and they buy material things, blah, 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 blah. They end up owing taxes or whatever. So overall, keep your ego checked. It's really good to have a silent confidence about what you do. You got to be confident and believe in yourself, not for the sake of other people and not at the expense of other people.
I think the power is the same. And particularly for leaders in a company, they get used to just being able to say, do this and get it done, and people do it. And then they don't even say, well, I think that's a bad idea, because they're afraid to speak up. I see power corrupt, or at least not maybe corrupt, but blind people, or, you know, not be the best leaders just because they're used to my way or the highway.
Yeah, and they look down, you know, in a CEO meeting situation where I have like anywhere from 15 to 20 CEOs sitting in front of me, I would say, do you know the name of your landscaper? Do you know the name of the person that empties your wastebasket at work? Well, no. I said, well, maybe you should, and maybe you should thank them. And maybe you should just give them a little handwritten note of appreciation. Thank you for doing a great job for cleaning my office. That ignites somebody. When I say ignite, I mean, I look at the little soul inside of a human being as a little flame, a little match flame. Yeah. And when you engage somebody, thanking them, just a simple thank you, it's like spraying gasoline, and you go, psh, You spray that little bit of gasoline on that little flame and it ignites their flame and it releases endorphins in the person receiving a compliment or receiving a thank you.
Yeah.
But it releases twice as many endorphins in the giver of that. You end up benefiting twice as much as the recipient of that compliment or that salutation or that sense of appreciation. Just do it. When you're in a supermarket, look at the name tag. Look at the waiter or waitress that's waiting on you in the restaurant. Look at the name tag and say, how you doing today, Jane? How you doing today, Joseph? You doing all right today? Oh, yeah. Every little encounter really matters. And again, you don't do it for anything in return. You do it because you want to go to that person's little flame inside. Not to get too philosophical, but I think at the end, when all is said and done and we're pushing up daisies or we're in an urn on a mantelpiece somewhere, that's how we're going to be judged. To what extent did we ignite other people's flames when we're on this planet? Because everything we do, everything we make, every item we buy stays here when we go to the next level. Everything. Including our bodies, everything stays here. But what moves on to the next level, in my belief, is that little flame inside. And that's how we're going to be judged. Don't ask me what happens from there on out. As far as I know right now, I've yet to go to that level.
So one of the questions that I usually ask people is, if they had a dream job, what it would be. And you've obviously already achieved your dream job, but if you had to do something completely different, what would it be?
There's nothing that I could do other than play drums in front of thousands of people that would bring me the same level of enjoyment and fulfillment. There's only one other activity that human beings partake in that could even equate with that feeling I get when I'm in the moment playing in front of and moving 20,000 people. And it's a little relationship between male and female. You could use your imagination. That's the only thing that comes in.
I didn't see that coming. I don't know how we got here, but
it's a convoluted different way, But
no, I asked for it.
You did. That's the only thing that really comes close. But within a drummer, being a drummer, and again, sharing the stories, and now as a speaker and getting people coming to me after a presentation and say, thank you very much. I needed to hear this right now at this time. I needed to hear this story. You had me in tears, whatever. That's a tremendous amount of satisfaction, knowing that just me being myself and giving examples from my life has helped other people and moved other people. That's very, very gratifying. In some ways, more gratifying than me just playing drums and having them clap along. You move people on a personal level, but I'm still connected to the rock and roll business. If the speaking business wasn't an option, I would love to have played drums in John Lennon's band after he left the Beatles. That's my ultimate. Beatles are my favorite band. Ringo's my favorite drummer. John Lennon is my favorite artist. To play in his band after he left the Beatles and play on stuff like Imagine and Instant Karma and stuff like that, that would be my dream.
I've been kind of surprised pleasantly at how adult you are. Like, you prepared for this interview, you responded to emails quickly. Like, I think that's a little bit of a stereotype in our heads that if you're a musician or if you're in the creative arts, you're just flighty and who knows if you're going to show up. But now that I think about it, if you want to be a professional, that means you have to act professional and prepare and respond and show up on time and all that kind of stuff. So that's been a lesson that I've learned today.
That's awesome, Lisa. Yes, you have to be, to be in the same business, no matter what your business you're in, if to be in it close to 58 years. And to maintain that, you have to be doing something right. And, a lot of people start out as the stereotype that you describe, and they last 5 years. There's actually a statistic that I mentioned in my presentation that only 5% of the musicians that pick up an instrument make a living for longer than 1 year. So the odds exponentially increased in my case, where I've made a living for close to 58 years, played with platinum artists, 4 of which in the Hall of Fame, played on top 10 records, whatever. I'm not here to wave my own flag, but that's what it is. I never take anything for granted. I never rest on my laurels. As I mentioned earlier, I'm always tweaking my presentation, what works, what don't work. I always want to do a great job. Yes, you can call it a little tinge of insecurity where, will the bottom drop out at any time? So that makes me pay more attention to the preparation because I wanted to be right and I wanted to go to the next level. I never rest on my laurels and say, okay, well, this is happening. Let's just go on autopilot right now. I'm never on autopilot. Never.
So final question. You've talked a lot about advice, but if you had to look at baby Sandy or young Sandy and give him advice, what would you say to him?
I would say lose your sense of everything having to be perfect. Lose your sense of no matter how hard you prepare and no matter how hard you visualize and look at the future positively, things don't happen on your timetable. You got to continue the work, maintain the work ethic, and it will happen when it's supposed to happen. As mentioned earlier, I was spent close to 10 years in the bars, getting home at 5 a.m, wondering when it's going to happen, get my first big break. I always remember this children's book, and I don't remember where I got it or where I've heard about it. I don't have it physically now, but I know I read it. It's The Battle of Two Wolves. You ever heard of it, Lisa?
I think I have. Yeah. Tell us though.
It's a Indian chief talking to his grandson. And he's telling, inside every human being, there's a battle going on between a good wolf, all about positivity, and a bad wolf, all about negativity. It goes on and on describing the characteristics of each. But then at the end, the grandson goes, well, which one wins the battle? And the grandfather goes, it's the one that you feed. It's the wolf that you feed. Mm-hmm. We were given a choice when we were born, Lisa, a power of choice. We were given that power. We're inundated with positive and negative thoughts all the time, thousands of them, but we have the power to choose which ones we pay attention to and which thoughts we allow to root in our brain, because thoughts become words, words become actions, actions determine your habits, habits determine your personality, and your personality is basically how people perceive you, and how people perceive us is basically how they're going to talk about us when we're pushing up daisies. So it becomes your legacy, but it starts out as a little flimsy cobweb, the thought, and then it turns into a chain link fence that surrounds your life. So be careful of what wolf you feed.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Talking Industrial Automation. If you are interested in learning more about Sandy, you can find him at www.sandygennaro.com. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Sandy, for joining me today.
It was my pleasure, Lisa. Thanks for the awesome questions. I appreciate it.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also really help the show by leaving a review and sharing with colleagues. We're all just slaves to the logarithm now, so I gotta ask. Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Thanks also to bensound.com and Wistia for the music bumpers. Until next time.